Lieutenant Kevin Petrus with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department Public Affairs Office. We are excited and proud to host you all today for our 2022 end-of-year press conference. Members of the media, thank you for being here. For those of you watching at home, thank you for tuning in. Today, CMPD will be releasing our 2022 end-of-year report. That report covers several topics, including crime statistics, enforcement statistics, and other information that we feel will help our community best understand the work of the Charlotte Police Department. A link to this full report will be made available on our social media platforms through media release and printed copy. CMPD saw both challenge and achievement in 2022. Charlotte experienced an overall crime increase of 3%, largely attributed to a 6% increase in property crime. However, violent crime decreased by 5%. Reducing violent crime was a top priority for CMPD in 2022, and the proactive work of our employees proved successful in that goal. Because of that work, CMPD also made great strides in firearm seizures, which you will hear more about shortly. Last year, our agency handled 979,000 calls for service and had 529,000 police interactions. CMPD made over 14,000 arrests, which represents a 7% increase. We have an exciting lineup of speakers here today to share information with you about some very important topics. Please note, we will take questions after all of the speakers are done, so please hold your questions to that time. Lieutenant Brian Crum, C-R-U-M, is going to speak about homicides and violent crime. Major Luke Sell, S-E-L-L, will speak about proactive gun seizures throughout the department. Major Jackie Briley, B-R-Y-L-E-Y, will discuss property crime, trends, and efforts. And Detective Rebecca Garber, G-A-R-B-E-R, will share about financial crimes. But first, Police Chief Johnny Jennings will come to share more about the year that CMPD had in 2022. Chief.
Thank you, Lieutenant Petrus, and thanks each and every one of you for coming today to hear some of the highlights of 2022 and some of the accomplishments that we were able to achieve. You know, this is fantastic. It's a time for us to be able to look back at 2023, not just the challenges that we had, 2022, not just the challenges that we had, but also some of the great accomplishments that we were able to achieve within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. And then to look ahead for 2023, some of the things and priorities that we want to see accomplished, some of the goals that we have for this upcoming year. As Lieutenant Petrus mentioned, I want to start with violent crime. We made certain last year, you remember me saying that a priority would be violent crime leading into 2022. We are happy to report that we've had a 5% decrease in violent crime, but put that in perspective a little bit more. That's on top of last year's 7% decrease in violent crime. So for the last 2 years, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department in our jurisdiction within the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County has seen a decrease in violent crime. So that's a pretty good accomplishment and proud, something that we can be proud of for our city and our jurisdiction. One of the things that I can attribute to this, and I've said this before, is it's important that we are continuing to take guns off the street and that we are continuing to take the most violent offenders as well off the street so that they're not preying on the citizens of Charlotte and taking advantage of those most vulnerable. In 2021, you remember me mentioning that we had started the crime gun suppression team within our agency. This team is responsible for taking hundreds of guns off the street. And the good thing about this, it's not just a matter of taking the guns off the streets, but they're intentional about who those guns come from. They are intentional about looking at those violent offenders that have the propensity to commit violent acts with the use of a firearm. And as they do their investigations and determine where those guns need to come off the streets, those are the ones that they are looking at and trying to get and trying to build cases on to ensure that they don't commit violent acts using firearms especially. You know, Major Brawley is also going to come up in a few minutes, and she's going to discuss some of the challenges that we've had with juvenile offenses, something that I've been passionate about as well. When you look at not just the acts that juveniles are committing in a violent way, but is also the ages of how much younger and younger that we're seeing some of these violent offenders in juveniles become. So when you see a 12 or 13-year-old that's committing serious violent offenses, that's very concerning, not just within the police department, but as a community. Last year, had 110 homicides that are reported. Some of those are still in review with the district attorney's office that may not end up being homicides. However, it is concerning when you get the phone call that you've had a life that has been taken too soon at the hands of another. The number is staggering when you look at the amount of homicides. However, the only acceptable number for homicides is 0. And out of that 110, there is a family that is grieving because they've lost their loved ones at the hands of another far too soon. So when we receive homicide calls and work on these cases, our detectives work extremely hard and diligently to ensure that we're solving these cases and to bring some sort of closure to the families that we're serving. And I couldn't be more proud of the work that our homicide detectives have done. Over the past 5 years, they have averaged a 79% clearance rate in homicides. And what that means is, when you look at the national average of 61%, we are far above that in how we are solving these cases and bringing closure to these families. The excellent work is not just with the homicide unit, however, we also have to look at the collaboration that they have with our violent criminal apprehension team, our real-time crime center, intel, crime analysis, CSI, as well as all the patrol divisions that when we have a homicide, they come together and they work diligently to ensure that they bring some closure to that case. And that's extremely important for us. So I commend all of our employees who work together to ensure that we continue to get that 79% or higher clearance rate when it comes to solving these most violent acts. So you've heard me over the past year talk quite a bit about the issues when it comes to pretrial and some of the bonds that we've seen in some of our most violent offenders that have been able to either get out or the bonds have made it accessible for them to get out. When you hear that our employees put hours and hours of work into not only solving a case, but also to make that arrest, find the individual, make the arrest, and put that person in the hands of the rest of the criminal justice system. But then to have the concern that that person is either put on an unsecured bond or a very low bond where he or she is able to get out and reoffend. This is extremely frustrating for not just the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department or law enforcement across our state and across our country, but it's also frustrating for the community, because the community has a right to be safe from those who are preying upon our most vulnerable citizens. We're not keeping our community safe by letting repeat violent offenders back out on the streets. We're doing a disservice to our citizens by doing that. I've had some very productive and regular meetings with Chief District Court Judge Elizabeth Trosh, with our District Attorney Spencer Merriweather, with our police attorneys, with chiefs across the state, as well as chiefs organizations and law enforcement organizations across the state. And they have the same concern. And they want to see some improvement within this part of the criminal justice system. So there's progress being made. You're going to see very soon some legislation proposed that's coming out that will put more accountability on the pretrial system, and we'll make some changes for the positive, and hopefully to be able to keep some of our most violent offenders who continue to repeat these offenses to remain in jail or to be held more accountable prior to getting access to be able to get out as easy as they are right now. So now, being a police officer, I'll tell you, it's a rewarding job. It's a noble job, an honorable job. But it doesn't come without its challenges when it comes to mental health and some of the wellness of our police officers as well as our other employees within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Every single call for service could be either they're involved in a traumatic incident or they're witnessing a traumatic incident, and that's something that the normal mind and human being doesn't always have to deal with, but our officers deal with it every day. Our dispatchers deal with it. Our crime scene investigators all the way around have that exposure to some of the worst days in many people's lives. So we have to continue to take care of the employees that are serving our community. We can't take care of our citizens unless we're taking care of our employees. So we'll continue to make officer wellness and employee wellness a priority for 2023. One of the efforts that I'm extremely proud of and most proud of within my over 30-year career is our CMPD Serves program. We center this around leaving a positive impression in just about every encounter we have, not just externally with the citizens that we come in contact with, but internally as well with each other. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department leads the way in being intentional about a customer service approach when it comes to our encounters with those that we serve and internally within our organization. We have trained all 2,600 employees in the first phase of CMPD Serves, and we've already begun the second phase of CMPD Serves, where training is underway now with our employees as well. That phase is going to be focused on employee wellness and world-class internal culture. So I'm extremely excited to get that underway and move forward, and also development of the next phase. So we're going to continue the CMPD Service program well into 2024 as well. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Lieutenant Petrus, and we're going to continue the press conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Up next to speak is Lieutenant Brian Crum. He's going to speak about homicides and violent crime. Lieutenant Crum is assigned to the Violent Crimes Division, the Homicide Unit.
Good morning. So today we're spending a lot of time talking about statistics and numbers, and the Chief touched on our numbers from last year. That's 110 homicides to date in 2022. But before we go any further into the numbers, I think it's really important that we stop and reflect on what that really means. As detectives, we're very close to the investigations. We don't see a homicide count. We don't see case number 1, 15, or even 100. We see people. We see our victims as the folks that they were. We see Ethan, we see Jimmy, we see Aaliyah. And as we work with families and their loved ones, friends, we get to know our victims, sometimes as if we knew them ourselves. We see firsthand the devastation that occurs when there's a loss, an unexpected loss, when someone loses someone close to them to violence. It devastates family, friends. It has ripples throughout the Charlotte community. Each of these 110 victims are somebody lost to the Charlotte community as a whole. In preparing to speak with you today, I looked through the rest of the numbers, and there was a couple of things that stood out to me. The first number that stood out was the ages of our victims. The oldest was 66 years old, and our youngest was 2 years old. It's 2. We also charged 87 defendants in conjunction with these crimes last year, and looking at those numbers, the number 18 stood out to me. 18 is the age in which we treat someone as an adult in the criminal justice system in North Carolina, and 18 is also the number of defendants we charged that were juveniles. 2 of our defendants were 14 years old. 14 to me, it's so young for someone to be involved in such adult decisions. We continue to see the main driver of our violent crime and our homicides in Charlotte to be simple, seemingly insignificant misunderstandings or disagreements that quickly escalate into gunfire. And it's really, really difficult to see that year in and year out, year after year, that the main driver that we see is just, things that seem like they're a passing disagreement that may be able to be worked out with a handshake or, even in the past, perhaps a fist fight turning into people shooting back and forth at one another. In responding to these horrible crimes, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department leverages our collective resources, those of our partners and in the community, in order to solve these crimes. There's one case that I think highlights that partnership really well that occurred this year. For those of you that are familiar with the murder of Ethan Rivera, he was a 41-year-old bus driver, bus operator. He worked here just a few blocks away in downtown Charlotte. And on February 11th, he was murdered while doing his job. This incident appeared to be a road rage incident. These cases are really challenging for us as detectives to work because the relationship between the two involved, it's the suspect and the victim is just a passing moment in time. Typically, they have no relationship outside of that one moment. And so when we respond out, it took everybody to get a successful resolution in that case. So in addition to the immediate response from our telecommunicators, our patrol officers out at the scene, CATS came out to support that effort, and real-time crime stepped up and started obtaining video. And our detectives and crime scene search responded out to begin processing the scene and beginning that investigation. I think it's also important to highlight a really critical group for us in doing what we do, and that's crime scene search and our lab folks. They bring to our investigation a scientific perspective. They're looking into our scenes as a scientist, really, and collecting and processing evidence in ways that we can develop information that help lead our detectives down the right path, sometimes to a suspect and hopefully ultimately to a conviction. So as the investigation moved forward into Ethan's murder, we reached out to the community for help. We got so far in the investigation, but we really need more information, and that's when we came to you guys, the media, another important partner in these investigations, with Ethan's family to ask for help. And our call was answered. The community stepped up and helped provide us with information that, in conjunction with forensics and good old-fashioned police work, led to us identifying a suspect in that investigation. So once we've identified a suspect, we bring the violent criminal apprehension team in, and they help to leverage their partnerships with the FBI. And in Ethan's case, it required cooperation between law enforcement agencies in Tennessee, Colorado, and Kansas, where the suspect was ultimately arrested by the Shawnee, Kansas Police Department. So really you can see there's a ton of players that come in to lift each little piece to get us to where we need to be. Like in this investigation, every single partner is critical, but the most important partner we have is the community. Sometimes they're the unsung heroes. We get up here and stand and talk about what we do, but the community coming up, I can't imagine how hard it's got to be to step up, to be the one to come forward and do the right thing and share that information. And our success is really very, very strongly tied to that relationship, and so I'm appreciative of that. So the chief talked about our 5-year clearance rate being at 75%, and that rate actually goes up to 78% as you step back and look at 10 years, and that's because of the dedication that we have to our victims. Our clearance rate is where it is because we don't forget our victims. We also have, in addition to the homicide unit, the detectives that stay with the cases and work them year in and year out, we have the cold case unit who works cold case homicides and cold case sexual assaults. They're a group of sworn and non-sworn employees. We also have civilian volunteers that lend their expertise to our investigations and going back to looking at cases that perhaps need a second look, either with new eyes or with new technology. And this collection of folks results in some fantastic outcomes. We also leverage cutting-edge forensic genetic genealogy and other new tools like that in order to obtain new leads in cases that were previously at a standstill. Our cold case homicide detectives are responsible for clearing nearly 70 cold case murders. That's not cases that are like a year or two old, but these are old cases reaching back all the way to the 60s and bringing justice to their families, along with hundreds of sexual assaults that have been cleared by our cold case sex assault detectives. It's this dedication to our survivors and to our victims that is really important to us, and letting the community know we still remember you long after your story's been out of the news. I'm going to go ahead and hand this back off to Lieutenant Peters.
Thank you, Lieutenant Crum. As I mentioned earlier, CMPD made great strides with firearm seizures last year. Here to talk more about that is Major Luke Sell. Major.
Good morning. As the chief mentioned, one of our top priorities for the department is prioritizing violent crimes, specifically gun crimes. As a department, we're making great strides to get guns off the street. 3,182 guns were seized in 2022. It's an 8% increase over 2021. The crime gun suppression team also known as Crime Gun, has been instrumental in seizing guns and tackling violent crime. Just for some background, our crime gun suppression team was formed in 2021 with the merging of the gang unit, the targeted response and apprehension team, and the shooting into occupied property unit. This team capitalizes on joint knowledge of criminal organizations in Charlotte to dismantle violent criminal activity. A few important stats that came out from Crime Gun last year. The team made 262 arrests, which is a 62% increase over 2021. Crime Gun seized 283 guns. 36 of those were stolen. That's an 83% increase over last year. It's a huge source of pride for our team and our organization. As part of their investigations, they seized over $812,000 last year. One of the programs that Crime Gun uses to help in our investigations is called NIBIN. NIBIN stands for National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. Very simply put, we use this system to connect gun cases on suspects that are committing violent crimes. There's been tremendous resource to us, as indicated by our increased seizures and arrest numbers. One of the great examples of our team's work was back in September. They're working in an area known for violent crime. See an unrelated car drive by, and they recognized it from a bulletin that had gone out about a robbery suspect vehicle. Stopped the suspect vehicle, ended up arresting 2 subjects and seizing a firearm. Their work through our crime lab, which is amazing, the crime analysis and a robbery unit, they were able to link that gun back to several other cases. We were able to charge those suspects with 9 robberies from person across the city, which is just amazing. I can't say enough about the role that our crime lab, our crime analysis unit, and our intel unit have played. They've been integral to our success over the past year. I hope the citizens can see that we have been and continue to be highly focused and committed to prioritizing gun-related crimes, and I can assure you that every member of our team works tirelessly to accomplish this mission.
Thank you, Major Sell. As I mentioned earlier, also, property crime was up in Charlotte last year. Major Jackie Briley is going to come to talk about property crime trends and the efforts that we made. Major.
Good morning. Major Jackie Briley over the Southeast Service Patrol area. CMPD has made great strides in lowering violent crime, which is one of the Chief's top priorities. However, this past year, we saw a rise in property crime, up 6%, fueling an overall rise in our violent incidents in 2022. That includes a 3% increase in larcenies, an 8% spike in our burglaries, and a 20% increase in our vehicle thefts. There's a common trend we're seeing across the board when it comes to these property crimes, and that involves juveniles playing a large role in these crimes. Our CMPD Juvenile Offender Priority Unit, those officers regularly attend court with juveniles. They work with the families of repeat juvenile offenders to find treatment and solutions. One example of this consistent great work that they do is they've identified last year's top 5 repeat juvenile offenders. For obvious reasons, we cannot say their names or their ages. However, these 5 individuals last year collectively combined in 97 arrests. Those 97 arrests included 97 victims on the other side of those crimes. Just in 2022, those 97 arrests were also charged with 179 crimes. So between 5 individuals, 97 arrests, and 179 crimes. While these are mostly property crimes that include countless stolen vehicles and larceny from autos or car break-ins, many of the items that they target in the car break-ins are guns that are left in vehicles, which can lead to violence. For example, in December of 2021, you recall a juvenile shot at an officer after being caught trying to break into a vehicle. CMPD can do all the proactive patrol that we possibly can, but we do need the community's help. We need the help of our parents and our guardians of these juveniles. Officers are coming in contact with these juveniles late at night and early hours in the morning. In our uptown area, we are receiving a lot of complaints in reference to businesses and residents and business owners about juveniles targeting their homes and their vehicles. Some of the tips and do's and don'ts for prevention is don't let strangers in your area without a key fob or let people tailgate in behind you. When you're in your common area, such as mail rooms, make sure that the person coming in with you has required key access. Our Public Affairs Unit has put out educational videos for larceny from auto crime prevention. Please visit our website for a refresher on those. One also crime prevention tip is to lock your car doors. We see a lot of incidents in our parking lots and our hotel parking decks and commercial businesses where suspects are targeting vehicles by pulling on door handles and going into unlocked cars. Park in well-lit areas, and please don't leave valuables inside your vehicles, especially firearms. Many times, multiple guns are stolen from these vehicles, including a case 2 days ago in Central Division's Uptown area where an assault rifle, a shotgun, and a handgun were all stolen from the same unlocked vehicle in a parking deck. For our auto thefts, use a steering wheel lock or some type of device that could work incredibly well. The goal will be for the suspect to see that device in the vehicle and possibly not target the vehicle. CMPD works closely with a lot of businesses and apartment complexes in our Uptown area and South End. However, being able to prevent the crime will be a lot easier than trying to solve it in some cases. Another issue we've seen in 2022 for property crime is commercial burglaries. Those have been up 29% and count for the largest increase in our burglary total. A major factor in those thefts are from construction sites across the city. This includes residential homes and apartment complexes under construction. A major factor, and as inflation increases in the price of raw materials, it seems to be that this issue is going to continue to possibly be a trend for us in 2023. Our division officers and our detectives collaborate with large-scale theft cases, and they do a great job of getting major offenders in custody. In 2022, CMPD launched an operation in response to crimes identified by our criminal intelligence and our crime analysis team. As I said before, vehicle thefts were a major spike in 2022, up 20%. This is in part due to a crime trend that started in social media back in June, where juveniles were able to carry out what was called a Honda and Kia theft challenge. Vehicles were able to be stolen using only a USB cord. In 2022, there were nearly 700 reported incidents of Kias or Hondas being targeted by thieves, which caused an 159% increase. Around mid-June, these thefts of Kias and Hondas spiked 346%. Upon learning of this trend, CMPD's Public Affairs Division worked with detectives and put out a series of awareness videos to the public. CMPD has also carried out operations via tips from the community and arrested 3 juveniles this past summer connected to more than 25 Honda Kia auto thefts spanning across multiple divisions. At this point in time, Honda and Kia thefts have dropped back to near 2021 levels since then. Additionally, we had a spike in our catalytic converter thefts in 2021. CMPD created a division-wide and a city-wide team called Operation Sawzall. This was to investigate groups responsible for stealing a large amount of catalytic converters. Catalytic converters thefts declined 20% in 2022. The department saw a large reduction since Operation Sawzall in late May, in which multiple suspects were arrested for several vehicles were seized. While catalytic converter thefts from private homes fell 61% in 2022, there was a significant increase in these thefts at hotels and motels around our area. That was up 167%. Vehicle dealerships also accounted for 85% of these thefts. CMPD will continue to work to decrease these crimes with multiple operations planned in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Major Briley. Our next speaker is Detective Rebecca Garber. She's assigned to the Financial Crimes Unit. She's going to be here to speak about a specific financial crime that we saw an increase in 2022. Detective.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk about the 41% increase with counterfeit and forgery cases that we've experienced from last year. The majority of this, as we're seeing, are from mailing locations, outgoing mail in a freestanding type of mailbox, whether it's secured or unsecured, and possibly going to a business park location. So a case I want to highlight real quick is a business mailed a check to a business park in Charlotte and North Division. They were contacted because payment wasn't received. They looked at the bank statement. They're like, oh, well, that's not who I made that check to. Reported the crime to their bank, who then the bank reported the crime to CMPD because they reimbursed the account holder. Through our investigation, we were able to identify the suspect from the video surveillance. A warrant was signed. This person was a very transient person. The warrant was out there. Our community reached out and said, hey, you know what? We filed a Crime Stoppers tip that we've seen somebody going through mailboxes. They actually called 911. The person was arrested for the warrant. So that was instrumental in making that arrest. That case is now pending. Some of the things that we can do to mitigate the theft to begin with, because that impacts our community and our economy. If you're going to mail checks, physically take them into the post office and drop them in the mail slot. That eliminates the opportunity for those checks to be in the mailboxes to be stolen to begin with. If you can utilize secured online banking and payments, then use that. If you're a business, you can protect your company and your clients by either obtaining a post office box where your checks go to, so they're not sitting there over the weekend, or you can contact the Postal Service to see if there's another avenue for you to get your mail delivered at a time that you're there. Be due diligent in checking your accounts to make sure that the check is cleared and that who it was made payable to is actually who it was delivered to. The other part of it is you got to report it. If we don't know about it, we can't investigate it. We want to be able to report it to CMPD. You can call 311, or if you're outside of Mecklenburg County, 704-336-7600. And also notify the Postal Inspector's Office for two different entities, and we have to know what is occurring. So, if you see something, report it. Call 911. Use Charlotte Crime Stoppers, and that's all I got. So thank you.
Thank you, Detective Garber. It's valuable information. As you can tell, there's so much for us to talk about for 2022. And as we reflect on those things, it's also good and important to look forward to 2023. Chief Jennings will now come back up to discuss how we're moving into 2023. Chief.
Thanks again, and you've heard some of the challenges, some of the great work that CMPD has faced last year for 2022. Where do we go from here? Again, some of my priorities that I want to outline to you today, some are going to be similar. One being the continued effort to decrease violent crime. I mentioned earlier we had a 5% decrease in 2022. That's on top of the 7% decrease in 2021. We can do better. We can continue to work and strive towards ensuring that the most heinous crimes and criminal acts that are taking place to our citizens we're going to continue those efforts to decrease those. Recruitment and retention efforts are also going to be a priority. We have to make sure that we are replacing those officers and those employees within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department who are leaving during retirement, particularly as we see the peak of this during this year and 2024. We're going to see a peak of the amount of officers that are going to be retiring, as well as employees within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. So we have to be able to backfill those positions and get more recruiting and also to retain the officers that we currently have. So we're going to also ensure that our officers continue to be the best equipped and also have the best technology and training that we possibly can give them to ensure that we are operating the most efficient and effective level possible. You know, I have to give thanks and kudos to our city council, our mayor, and our city manager, Marcus Jones, who's always been supportive to make sure that we have the best equipment, that we have the best training, and we have the best technology so that Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department can continue to be the lead in the country when it comes to all of this. and we will also continue to be the best agency in the country as long as we continue to be the best equipped, trained officers and have those tools that make us efficient and effective. So let me end by saying this. Every single year we're going to have challenges. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department is going to have challenges. The city of Charlotte-Mecklenburg County is going to have challenges. We know that. The challenges are going to continue with violent crime. The challenges are going to continue with recruiting and retaining officers and employees within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. But make no mistake whatsoever that I am extremely proud of our department. I'm extremely proud of every man and woman that comes to work every single day with the primary goal to make sure that the city of Charlotte and our citizens in Mecklenburg County continue to be safe, that we continue to do the best that we can to create a safe environment for everyone who lives, works, and plays and visits in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. I am so grateful for the men and women of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department for taking this call when this profession has been going through some very tumultuous times over the last couple of years, and that we have stepped up to the plate and continue to keep our community safe. That's a very admirable position to be in when you look at the position that we are in within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department and within law enforcement across the country. I certainly look forward to this new year. I am very optimistic about what we have to see and offer for 2023. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Chief Jennings,
Yes,
I would
sir.
be remiss if I didn't ask about something that happened this morning. It's a case that's very dear to your department.
Yes.
The Mia Goodwin case. The defendant pleaded guilty to all charges.
Yeah.
A part of that plea deal was to drop the death by motor vehicle.
Yes.
Your reaction to this finally concluding?
Yeah, well, my reaction, one, is I am grateful that this brings another close in the chapter for closure for this incident. Is something that was very difficult for our police agency and very difficult times for us, but this is another closure to that. I do respect the decision by the district attorney's office. We understand it. We were able to speak with the officers within Mia's division and have these discussions, and we knew that we had to bring this closure and offer this plea. So, yeah, it's something I hope that we can move forward from this point. But we've learned a great deal from this tragic accident and things that we've put in place to make sure that we continue to be better and continue to be safer when we come to investigating collisions. So.
In relation to what we're talking about today, I want to ask the Violent Interrupters Coalition. It's been a year plus since they have been focusing on areas. Do you see that as being helpful in preventing violent crime, and should it expand in your mind?
Yeah, certainly I think so. And what I like about the violence interrupter programs that we are seeing is the ownership has taken just beyond the police department. You know, how many years historically have we looked at crime and the increase in crime and simply looked at the police department to solve those issues? Well, when you look at it as a health crisis across the county, and that there are more entities that are taking ownership in what we're seeing when it comes to not just violent crime, but crime in general in some of our most vulnerable areas. It's refreshing to me as the police chief to know that we are partnering with the county and the city government, and also to make sure that we bring the resources to these communities so that we can stop that cyclical criminal activity that we've seen in these communities. So I think it's very helpful. I think I know there's some thoughts and ideas about expanding it, and I look forward to that and continuing that partnership. Yes, ma'am.
Chief, next week, the White House will be meeting with all the mayors of the city. As Mayor Lyles prepares for this conference, what information, what priorities would you like her to speak about and share as far as CMPD and law enforcement here in the community?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that as Mayor Lyles prepares, I want her to make it aware that we do need support. We have, we are looking at, you see what's happening across the country as we've had some challenges with law enforcement over the past several years, and the results of the spike in violent crime and the mass exodus that we've seen through the profession, and the difficulty that we've had in recruiting and retention as well. So I think we need to change that narrative. I think we need to turn it back around and let's start focusing on some of the good things that we see within these police agencies that we're doing all across the country. We are one of the few professions that something can happen across the country that affects us tremendously and over here in Charlotte. So I want to be able to turn that narrative around and focus more on some of the great work and some of the good things that we do within law enforcement.
Yes, sir. Chief, let me ask you a couple of questions about recruitment and retention of officers. First of all, do you know how many officers you're short right now?
Number is, I don't have the exact number. I think it's over 200 at this point. But I'm more concerned, too, with the number that we're going to see. If you remember, in the early 90s, there was a mass hiring of 125 extra officers. As we get forward into we've projected 2023 and 2024 are going to be the highest number of those officers retiring. So if we can't get more people in the seats for recruiting and hire at a more progressive rate, then we're really going to have to take a serious look at what can we stop doing and how can we be as efficient as possible with the people that we have. These numbers that you heard today are numbers of us doing things with less people, and I think that's pretty admirable that we've had some people step up to the plate.
And to that point, doing more with less, I know it was a couple of weeks ago, in the middle of the afternoon, I believe it was 25 calls that were in queue, just waiting to be attended, that were just going in order. Some of them were really violent crimes or violent crime calls. How do you determine and how do you prioritize which calls officers go to, and that people aren't left waiting 3-4 hours for an officer to show up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult task, and that's one that when we look at our 911 and our dispatch, they have to be able to prioritize those, and a lot of those are determined too on prioritization is the suspect still on the scene? Is it something that it might have been a violent crime, but is it over and done with now and just waiting to do the report? Is there solvability factors on the scene that we need to get out there? So they're in a very tough position, and our dispatchers, I mean, we have an awesome communications division that they work tirelessly and working overtime and trying to make sure that they get officers all the information they need and get them out to the scenes as soon as they possibly can. But you know, it's difficult. You can't have an officer work in a traffic accident with injuries and then leave a scene to go take a robbery report. So we have to be able to prioritize as best we can, and that's not easy at times.
And one last question on this. In terms of, is it just as simple as increasing pay to try and get officers or people to join? Like, what are, Fresno has done a really good job of increasing their law enforcement offices, but other enforcement agencies have had difficulties. Yeah. Is it as simple as more money, or what is the simplistic answer?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, that's a question that we've had not just within Charlotte-Mecklenburg, but also across the country. As I've talked to my peers in major cities across the country, police chiefs, that the incentives that are offered to try and get people to join their agencies, some have gone up into several thousands, about $20,000 and $30,000 just to sign on to be a police officer. We have a $7,500 incentive. That does not move the needle enough to get the people in the seats that we need, and so it's a good thing and a good opportunity to be able to offer those incentives, but I don't think it's enough. I think what we need to do is to turn the narrative of the profession around and to make sure that people understand that this is an admirable, noble job and profession, something that will bring that you can give great service to our community, and hopefully people will see that and then begin to have more interest in becoming law enforcement officers. So, yes, ma'am.
Chief, you folks spoke a little bit about homicides, and unfortunately the CATS driver, Ethan Rivera, and the work that it took, nationally. With the up-and-coming bus strike, what are the plans that you folks have? Are you able to share that you've been planning with the city for a possible strike of the CATS bus drivers? Because a lot of them have been in fear for their safety, and I'm sure that's a little bit of the drive behind striking.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And our bus drivers, yeah, absolutely, they're in a vulnerable position when they're picking up people that they have no idea who's getting on the buses and what they have when they're getting on the buses. And sometimes we've seen some escalation of tempers and things that have happened, and they're put in very bad situations. So we do have plans to work with CATS and to make sure that we can offer advice and information as much as we possibly can to keep their drivers safe. And one of them and that they have implemented and has been, you have to be careful of having those confrontations in the first place. Now we have to stop short of putting a police officer on every bus. We just cannot do it. We don't have the resources to be able to do that. But I know that they are looking internally at some other things they can do logistically to keep their drivers safe. But we certainly do want to partner with them and make sure that we're doing everything we can and giving them any tools that we have to offer to keep their drivers safe.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
go for it.
Okay, thanks, Senator. More into that violent end to 2022 and into 23.
Yeah.
And a response, is it having to do more with less? Does that have something to do with it? And what are you having as far as an outlook in that violent area?
Yeah. So when we talk about focusing on violent crime and going into 2023, you saw what we did in 2021 with the crime gun suppression team. So it's the evaluation of manpower, the evaluation of who we have to offer. We have certain specialized units that we have to really be able to take a close look at and see where those units should be focused on and where they should be or what crimes they should be targeting. And we did that with the crime gun suppression team with the combination of the 3 units. Some were specifically for property crimes that we felt like that we could pass that along to the divisions to have that responsibility. But let's put these great detectives that do fantastic work together specifically for gun crimes within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area, because that's what we were seeing a huge increase or concern with. And to be able to do that, and there are other units that we do have that are focused on certain things that we have that opportunity to say, do we need to pull back and put more people answering calls for service? Do we need to put together another task force that specifically targets certain criminal behavior out there? So as we continue to evaluate our manpower, we're going to continue to see where best to put them and what best to task them with.
Following up on the Greenbelt, the sexual assaults and rapes, although those numbers are down, that high-profile case that we followed for a while back, what is the latest on that?
Is that the lady who was beaten? And
Yeah, Cal, thank you.
Yes. I don't have the latest on that. We can certainly get that, but that was also one that I was showed some frustration with as far as the bond that was set. So.
Chief, you said your violent crime was a big word for you last year, looking into last year. What is your priority looking into 2023?
Yeah. So looking into 2023 as it refers to violent crime, we're looking at some of the resources that are in place right now with our, particularly our some of our crime units that deal within the divisions themselves. We've already started doing some focusing with that to where we can combine efforts across division lines and also across the lines of even bureaus within the city that we can put a common goal in place when we start seeing these trends. They are also have to be responsive to whatever the crime is going on that they unfortunately can't have set hours. They have to be able to be responsive to those crimes. So as we look at that, there's a lot of things that we're doing that we've done that have proven successful that we're going to continue to do, but we're always evaluating staffing and manpower and what we can do to what we need to be responsive on other things. So
You hinted at that.
Two more questions, okay?
The discussion that you had with Judge Trosh and the DA regarding these low bonds and the legislation that could be coming, can you give us any insight as to what a potential solution would look like in favor by you?
Yeah, so I think the solution is accountability. We have, when you give, there's so much ambiguity when it comes to a magistrate who's an independent judicial official who can set these bonds, and you might have a bond in Mecklenburg County that might be $1,000, but if you do it in another county, the same crime, same history, it might be $100,000 or $50,000. And I think we have to reduce that and take away that and have more accountability because if I feel like you have to put some certain crimes in the hands of a judge who's accountable to the public and are elected into their positions, that you have to put some of that accountability to the judge and not just to a magistrate who you often can't even identify who that person is. So we increase the accountability, have a better structure, and take away some of the ambiguity and some of the discretion that's held within the magistrate's office.
Chief, a year ago at this time, there had been 25 guns found at a CMS campus.
Yes.
And I remember last year when you had the press conference at West Charlotte High School that you said you weren't necessarily in favor of, you understood why they needed to be metal detectors or body scanners, but it looked bad.
Yes.
Because this year there's only been 2, do you think that's 100% attributed to the body scanners at the high schools and middle schools?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't want to say it's 100% attributed. There's some other things that we put in place, like the reestablishment of the Campus Crime Stoppers program, and I think certain things, the deterrence of that, as well as some of the educational pieces to the parents, as far as and the charges that have come when they are not securing, parents aren't securing their firearms, and these firearms are showing up at the jail. So, I think what my point was back then was I don't like the idea of a school being portrayed as a fortress, and I don't like the idea of police being there as the school resource officers being there for simply security. There's so much more than security, and I want them to be able to do that and have those interactions with the young people and build those relationships. So the scanners, I understand certainly why they were put in place, and I think they have been effective. I just hope that someday we can get to the point where we don't even need them at all. So. There was one more. I'll get one more. Yeah.
In regards to still the vital role in needing more staff, does the review reflect anything about on-duty officers and the use in sports, especially with football? Because I know it was an issue the year before. We haven't heard too much this year. And with the limited number of officers and resources, does it reflect, or you have a comment?
Yeah, Charlotte is continuing to grow and continue, especially coming out of COVID with the additional special events that we have seen, and it just continues to rise every year. But we can't put these events on without security, and oftentimes that safety and security measures are behind the scenes that you don't even see. You just go and enjoy a game or an event, and you don't see the hours and hours of work that goes into planning for that on a security perspective. So we've put some things in place and measures that, one, to incentivize officers to work those as extra duty so that we don't have to pull on duty. And we also have some other really good things coming in place as far as how those officers are paid, what the pay scale, pay rates are, and to allow for some of our civilian employees to be able to take advantage of certain jobs that don't necessarily have to be filled by a sworn police officer, such as some of the directing traffic in intersections and things like that. So all of those are going to ease the pool of officers off the streets when we have to ask for them to come in from the divisions. We want to be able to eliminate that completely, and I think we've made great strides of that. But also there's some things that, as departments struggle across not just our state, but across the country, is I'd like to see some things that can be taken off of officer response also. And we've seen some of that with some of the mental health response that we're looking at, but also some things such as taking traffic accident reports where there's no injury and no crime committed. I don't see that is necessary that a sworn police officer spends, hours out of their workday to take a report for a minor fender bender. So as we continue to look at things like that, I think that we're going to be able to ease some of the stress and workload off of the sworn positions within the department. All right, so thank you so much, and I appreciate it. And Lieutenant Petrus, you want to?
Thank you all again for joining us today for the 2022 end-of-year press conference. We're looking forward to a great 2023. As a reminder, we're going to send out a media release that has a link to the complete report for the 2022 end of year, and it could also be found on our social media channels. Thanks all for being here.